Welcome to the WARC Podcast. I'm Lexi Wolf, head of advisory for WARC Americas. Today, we're focusing on marketers who put real sweat equity into their brands. They're the lean teams behind mid sized businesses trying to grow in an increasingly complex environment. And this episode is in partnership with Intuit MailChimp, who recently worked with WARC on a brand new global study, The Marketing Equalizer Leveraging AI for Mid Market Growth. Now, according to Intuit QuickBooks Small Business Insights, almost half of all small and mid sized businesses say their top business priority for the near term is running a successful marketing campaign. But every day, mid market marketers are fighting an uphill battle. They're chasing growth against the biggest brands in the world, but without the matching resources. So the playing field isn't equal. How can they close that gap? Could AI be that great equalizer that gives small teams the power, insight, and speed once reserved for the world's biggest brands? We looked at this in our study and we uncovered a paradox. An almost unanimous 98% of mid market marketers globally believe AI could make their marketing more effective. The problem is, most don't yet know how to put it to work. This tension between optimism and readiness really defines where the mid market stands today. They're confident in the potential of AI, but still searching for practical routes to apply it to their marketing. So, in this episode, we'll explore how that capability gap is shaping the next era of marketing for mid-sized brands, and the idea of AI as that great equalizer that levels the playing field for them to compete. Joining me today are two experts, Jillian Ryan, the Senior Manager of Content Marketing Strategy at Intuit MailChimp, who partnered with us on this report, and Caroline Gigerich, Vice President, AI and Marketing Innovation from IAB. Thanks for being with us, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited about this conversation. Jillian, let's start with you. What inspired MailChimp to take a closer look at mid marketers now? And what were you hoping to uncover?
Yeah, Lexi, really great question. I think our inspiration for this report came directly from what we've been seeing with the businesses that we serve. So we realized that these companies really sit in this sweet spot, right? They're too big to rely on the startup tactics, but they're also too small to compete with the sheer budgets of the large enterprises that dominate the space. So they're in this position that where they constantly have to figure out how to do more with less. And then with that problem statement, I've been in the thought leadership space for many years, and there's just countless state of marketing reports for enterprise businesses. But there's a real lack of insight that's specific to the mid market, which is such a vital component of our customer base. So, knowing that, we set out to really uncover three core things in this research with WAR. So first, what is the mid-market marketer landscape? What do their teams look like? What are their budgets? What are the marketing channels that they're prioritizing? What are they adopting in terms of tech? And then let's look at their core constraints, right? So we know that their teams are lean. And what are their most pressing day-to-day pain points? What's stalling their growth? What's making it harder for them to deliver impact? And then finally, really grounding ourselves in this AI opportunity. At MailChimp, we know that AI is a critical competitive edge, but we wanted to really pinpoint where mid-market marketers stand in their adoption, are they optimistic? Do they see the potential in what AI can do for them? And so all of those things are really key focuses of this research.
Caroline, as our AI expert, from your perspective, why is AI for this segment so critical right now?
Yeah, I think some of it is echoing what you mentioned in your opening, Lexi, and also what Jillian just mentioned. The marketers are really facing like a perfect storm. They're competing against these large enterprises that have exponentially more resources. They have bigger budgets. They've got larger teams. They've got specialized talent, but they're sitting there being asked to do even more than their counterparts at these large organizations. And the pressure of that, you can read across reports that are talking about how, these staffs are thinking about AI. However, what makes AI so pivotal, I think, is again, kind of echoing what you said, it's a force multiplier. For the first time, a team of 10 marketers can access capabilities that previously required dozens of specialists. You've got AI as an analyst, AI as a copywriter, AI as a data scientist all at once. So the access, I mean, a lot of people talk about this word democratization, but I really love this for mid-market teams specifically. And I think they're at an inflection point, right? They can either embrace AI, not just for a tool for efficiency, but this real strategic advantage, and they will absolutely leapfrog their competitors. They're going to build that muscle memory, they're going to experiment, and they're going to, in my mind, win. But the flip side is the cost of inaction for these teams is also quite high because they are not only going to be left behind by their peers in the mid-market section, but also these large organizations as well.
Yeah, it's being able to access all that specialty, whenever these mid marketers are often wearing many hats and playing many roles, definitely hugely important for them. And you had mentioned that perfect storm. So let's talk a little bit about what life actually looks like for mid marketers today, because what we found in our research is that evidence of that perfect storm, the landscape is really presenting just a sea of challenges. Everything from economic challenges to structural challenges like limited resources to the actual executional challenges of doing good marketing. So things like strategy, optimizing, measuring marketing effectiveness. Um, Jillian, what's the story when it comes to mid marketers' key challenges?
Yeah. So we've kind of alluded to some of the struggles, but we do now have the data from this survey to kind of put some numbers behind it. And I think the real headline is this like sheer reality of their size. 51% of the mid market organizations that we surveyed said that they have 10 or fewer marketers on their team. So when you think about the massive scope of modern marketing, right, with that small of a team, therein lies the main struggle. And then, even if they have the budget to hire, our survey also found that they have challenges in regards to finding the right people, retaining the right people, and also finding the right specialists. And then I also think, through our survey, what was most striking to me is that their biggest capability gap actually lies in AI. So, over a third of the global marketers that we surveyed cited that competence in AI was actually their top concern. So, they know that AI is the future, but they really lack the internal talent, the internal skills to actually get started. And this is why, this report is so important because we really think it could be this great equalizer. It's the area where they feel like they can't compete right now, but if they take the steps laid out in the report, they'll be able to.
Yeah, and let's talk about that technology for a minute. So, Caroline, knowing that 98% of those marketers believe AI can increase their marketing effectiveness, in terms of where the technology is like in the hype cycle, do you think that instinct is right? Like is AI just a hot buzzword? Is the bubble about to burst? Or at this current moment, is its potential to meet these challenges a real reality for these brands?
Yeah, I think it's the $1,000,000 question, right? I will say, and I really operate from this place that life is a sea of gray and nuance versus like strict answers, and that's going to be my answer here. It's really both, right? We can't ignore that there is some definite hype going on in AI. There is. If you were looking at how much VC capital is flowing into AI and how money is being sent back and forth between very large entities, there's hype, okay? But underneath all that noise, there's real substance there. And what that figure that Jillian just shared tells me is that marketers are sensing something really tangible. And to empathize as someone who prior to IAB was a 20-year marketer, the stress of all of these tools coming at you when you're also just trying to deliver an email campaign is intense, right? You're just trying to do your job, and then they're like OpenAI developed 10 new tools, and Jillian, I know you're at Mailchimp, but and people are trying to understand like all the cool new AI goodies Mailchimp has, and it's stressful, you know? I think where we are right now, though, in the hype cycle, the beginning was let's just talk about all the sexy tools, the Gen AI, we're making an image, we're making a video. And I think now people are moving to more of the ROI and the data and the science because the technology has now become mature enough that marketers are also being asked to actually deliver on results. And those results require getting a little bit more scientific about the approach. I also think accessibility has changed. AI and machine learning was really something only large companies could access prior, think like 5 years back. But now you're talking about it in this report. The accessibility is really there. It's just getting people to the point where they have the skill sets to be able to use it.
So a lot of these teams don't the problem is they don't have endless resources, right? And that now that democratization of technology is happening for them, they have to be strategic about where they focus. So let's zoom out for a second and talk about mid marketers' marketing plans and kind of see what's working for them. We have this in the report as the mid market playbook. So Jillian, what stood out to you about marketers' media plans?
Yeah, I think this was something that was actually surprising to us. There is a high level of commitment in budget. And over half of respondents in the survey said that 11% or more of their total operating budget is dedicated to marketing. So that's a great win. But it's also the way they use that 11% has a very narrow focus. The investment is spread across a surprisingly contained footprint. So they rely on just a median of 4.85 channels regularly. And most heavily that skews towards channels like paid search, paid social, which are incredible channels for more immediate wins. But I think over reliance on those channels really puts these marketers at a risk of just perpetually living in a short-term mindset.
I agree that that's really surprising. A median of 4.85 means probably some have 8 or 10, but probably some have 2 or 3 channels that they're relying on. So really needing to diversify there, and that short term, like leaning on those paid media channels, it really does lead to that short termism, which is something we know is one of the key challenges that all marketers face because of the continual pressure to do more faster, but it's just not sustainable. But let's talk about owned channels then. Email, SMS, where we're using first party data. What role do these play for marketers, and why are these such powerful channels for brands?
Yeah. So I think the smart, resourceful marketers are absolutely grounding their sustainable growth strategies in first party data and really owning that direct relationships through those own channels like email and SMS. They're really foundational, right? So they're powered by data that you own on your customers. These are channels that can be used across the entirety of the funnel. So whether you're trying to drive awareness or you're trying to drive retention, you're trying to even drive like upsell, repeat purchases, email and SMS can do all those things. And then when you click a layer deeper, you could deliver personalized campaigns. You can optimize your send times. You could create automated journeys. So you take a lot of the manual heavy lifting out of it, and those journeys can execute based on like behavioral data. So it really helps you deliver predictable ROI. And so when you think about like a mid-market company that's up against all these resource challenges, it's really invaluable to be leaning on these channels because it really reduces dependency on the constantly changing and expensive media platforms, right?
Exactly, and those channels, the owned channels, their value compounds over time. Like, it really is a long-term investment where when you're using them right, they're owned directly by the brand. You have more direct control over the audience, the targeting, the message. Obviously, that's powered by the tech stacks that marketers have, right? So we looked at tech stacks in the report, and benchmarked those for mid-marketers, and we found that 61% of mid-market companies use more than four MarTech platforms. But we also observed this correlation that teams with richer tech stacks and with deeper AI usage are more experimental and more competitive. They actually are 11 points more likely to say they're performing ahead of their peers. And Caroline, I'd love to get your take on this because this is one we debated when we were analyzing this data. Does leveraging technology actually increase competitiveness for teams?
It's funny because when I was thinking about, this question, I kind of pivoted and went a completely different route in the sense that it's not the tech stack itself, but if you, like, zoom out and look at MarTech teams specifically, if you look at the type of folks that are part of really robust tech stacks, they have something that I think is really important to success here. Not only are they experimental and have really innovative thinking, I had this boss at HBO who gave me a mug that said structure and discipline on it because his point was that ideas are fantastic, but you have to have the structure and discipline to actually execute, pilot, look for the appropriate KPIs, and pivot accordingly based on what you see in your measurement. And Martech's teams do this really, really well. Like, because this is part of their edict in the organization. So I would say if marketing teams are trying to extrapolate out, okay, what does that mean for me? High level, it means when you're looking at being experimental, get scientific. What do I mean? Well, think about the ways that you can drive the highest ROI for your organization. Every marketer wants that to be an easy answer, but I'm sure Jillian would agree with me. It's not. Every organization has different challenges and thus will have different solutions that are custom to them. But think about those problems to solve. And I think that you can get experimental and curious in those arenas. And then also think about the appropriate measurement that you want to drive. Going in, it's not just, hey, let's try this new tool and see what it does. It's we want to drive these KPIs by this timeline, get specific. If you see the success, keep driving more and leaning in. If you don't, pivot.
Caroline, I love that idea of structure and discipline and making sure you really have the right focus and strategy moving forward. That was one of the things when we're talking about AI in this report. One of the most reoccurring conversations is around finding that balance between efficiency, which we know AI is very good at, and effectiveness, which is really what matters when growing brands. The real question here is how can AI help mid market marketers achieve effective growth, not just produce more faster? How can they have the best of both worlds there? And one of the things at work that we really wanted to emphasize when it comes to people's approach to applying AI is that it has to be rooted in a sound strategy, right? You can't just doing more, just producing more, just creating more output is not going to be the thing that actually drives growth for an organization. You do have to root it in amplifying and augmenting the strategy, the actual growth strategy, that those basic principles of marketing effectiveness. Of marketing effectiveness. So, getting the right amount of reach, the right targeting, investing the right amount, all of these things that planning for long-term growth really drive effectiveness for an organization need to be at the root of how people apply AI. And Caroline, we talked about this in your interview for the report, and I loved one of the things that you said. You said that one of the ways that AI can improve effectiveness is that it can help marketers see around corners. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I'll start on my end. And I must, in every podcast, include an 80s quote. In this case, it's life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might just miss it. Anyone know what that's from?
I don't know what it's from. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Now I feel old.
I'm gonna go ask ChatGPT to
It
tell
is
me.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, I should have known. I should
the,
have known.
the very wise Ferris Bueller gave us this impeccable quote. And for me, what that means is the number one rule of AI Fight Club is curation, right? There is a massive amount of information coming at all of us. And so having a very quick filtering strategy and like honing that down sounds so easy. It's not, I assure you. For marketers, seeing around corners, I'm going to go back to something Jillian said, which is really about moving from reactive to predictive, right? So, instead of reporting on what just happened, anticipating what comes next. What does that really look like? It looks like instead of waiting till the end of a campaign to see what worked, AI can analyze signals in real time and tell you what creative is resonating, what audience segment is about to churn, or which message is likely to drive conversion before you've literally spent your entire budget. An aha moment for me was actually having a chat with a CMO at a very large brand who is really giving me the understanding of how fine-tuned this churn awareness is. Because I spent some time in streaming at Showtime, and we had conversion tools, but not like this. These tools are precise, um, and they can surface insights that humans would miss. So we're talking about pattern recognition at scale, where AI can spot customers who engage with a specific piece of content and are 3 times more likely to purchase within 48 hours. For mid-market marketers, that is like liquid gold, definite seeing around corners stuff.
Yeah, I love that, and that helps to amplify their experimentation, right? It makes it, they can make do smarter experiments, they can apply, smarter insights. I love that. Now, thinking that these mid-market marketers are constantly improvising, they have to do more with less, they're playing multiple roles, right? Um, they also potentially have more autonomy and less bureaucracy when they're on these smaller teams in these smaller organizations. I'm curious if you think that that kind of scrappy mindset that a lot of times they have, if that gives them an advantage in adopting and leveraging AI compared to their larger competitors, or does it make the stakes higher?
Absolutely. I think mid-market teams have a huge hidden superpower here, and it's precisely that scrappy, improvised approach. And I'll call out my former company, Warner Music Group. I was corporate, so think of that as between all of the labels, big organization, right? The Music Latino team, super scrappy, super low budget. I used to look at them with, like, jealous envy eyes and be like, "How are you doing all this?" And it's because large enterprises, and we were the same company, but one was an offshoot, smaller by design, and one was part of the larger organization. Large organizations get stuck in their own complexity. They have layers of approval, legacy systems that don't talk to each other, and the don't talk to each other piece is almost like one of the biggest problems there is. They have more to lose, right? They're slower to innovation, not because they don't want to innovate, but because they have larger legal teams, larger tech teams. They have specialists for everything. It sounds great, and it is, but it also kind of leads to more siloed decision making and slower iteration. Mid-market teams, they don't have all of that bulk, and I know they feel the weight of that sometimes, but they're wearing multiple hats and they're making decisions on the fly. Critically, though, the most important thing, they have shorter decision-making chains. Like, if something took me, like, 3 months, they would decide that in a day, and that agility is, like, literally liquid gold. It's a massive advantage, and I hope I'm using enough passionate language here to really drive home what an advantage I think they have there.
I'm totally in agreement, and your passion is met with absolute agreement. I think that's what makes this moment so important for mid market marketers, right? To really look at that opportunity and take advantage of it. So that's one of the things with this report, why we benchmarked that state of AI adoption for mid market marketers. So, Jillian, would you tell us a little bit about that? Where are mid marketers in their AI journey right now?
Yeah. So we talked about the optimism earlier, right? And we were super excited to see like near unanimous 98% of respondents believe that AI will improve their marketing effectiveness. But when you look at the reality of the adoption, it is certainly broad and it is really not that deep just yet. We are just at the starting line. So a few stats here. The majority say that they use AI in some capacity. Most report only partial adoption, though. So only a third, 35%, are categorized as what we call in our research AI embedded. And essentially, what that means is that AI is leveraged as a systemized partner, often with dedicated resources, right? Which is like the ideal, but not a large amount of respondents are doing that. The most common use cases are really still quite nascent and exploratory. So we're on the right path, right? So it's mainly using generative AI tools that are free and really looking for like LLMs to research, to brainstorm, or do the first draft of copy creation, write a brief, right? All those are good things, but that's where the scale gets difficult. And so the principal constraint that we saw in the survey is that they're just overwhelmed. They lack the knowledge and the skills. And this is really this capability gap that is the biggest obstacle for them and bigger than the budgetary constraints or their uncertainty around ROI.
Yeah, that gap between the optimism and the actual ability to apply it is really striking. And it's interesting. It's just more inefficient, more ineffective for them to be scrapping together little problem solves with AI and not actually taking a more robust approach to unlocking its greatest benefits for their organization. So that gap, Caroline, I'm curious what you think of this. What do you think is behind that lag in the journey? Are these teams not ready for AI? What does it mean to be ready for AI? Uh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's not that they're not ready. There was a lot of double negatives in there. I think they're caught in this classic, we know what we need to do. We don't have all of the tools to do it conundrum. And if we all think about our own personal stories, how many times have you been aware of something that you want to change in your own life, but you're not exactly sure how to get there? I would say that's marketers. When I looked at the barriers in your report, it cited lack of knowledge, struggle with integration, and this worry about data privacy. That told me a lot. But all of that points to organizational readiness problems, which is classic, right? And I felt a lot of this in my former role. My former role at Warner Music Group, just for the record, was VP Innovation. So my job was to onboard new technologies from Web3 to AI before I left. So I actually felt a lot of this friction, but in a large organization myself. To to me, AI readiness is 3 things. Not all encompassing, but these are the most important to me. 1, this is the hardest one. Sounds so easy. 1, do you have clean, accessible data? I'm gonna be honest so that most people don't freak out by that question. Most marketers would say that's super complicated. They're either trying to get there, haven't started. So if you can't answer yes, that's not the end of the world. But it is important because I'm sure all of our grandmothers have told us like garbage in, garbage out. The same as for AI. 2, do you have leadership alignment and budget allocated? I will be honest in saying when I was trying to onboard AI tools, I did not appropriately think through the right task force of leaders to bring to the table. Specifically, the biggest hurdle, I'm just letting people learn from my failures, was legal. If you and some mid-market teams won't have like a, full legal team, but they'll have one legal representative. If you don't get all of the right teams invested early and it's later, you will do 2 times the amount of education later, and that slows everybody down. Budget for mid-market teams, they may be like, "Well, we don't do huge budgets." Even if it's a small budget, it can't be a side project that's just, like, tacked on somewhere for someone in their spare time. To your point, Lexi, you're thinking, "Well, why aren't they thinking bigger and strategically?" Typically in the beginning, it's like, "Oh, that person in the org sorta likes AI, like, Tom, can you just jump on that, when you have some extra time?" That's not gonna lead to huge strategic shifts. And then the third is, do you have a culture that tolerates experimentation and learning? It's super important because if you don't, then you're not gonna be able to pilot. You don't need all 3 of those. Specifically, one I know makes people get very pressured. Pick one high impact, low risk use case to pilot and go from there. That would be my best recommendation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that starting point where AI usage is actually bubbling up, I do see it as it either is that use case of them being like, "Yeah, Tom's pretty good with AI. Tom uses ChatGPT, ask him,"
Right.
or it's a CEO, a CMO, someone in leadership hearing this buzzword and saying, "We need to do AI," and then handing the team the call to do AI is, like, essentially the whole charge,
Yeah.
and
Like
and
sprinkle some AI on it.
they're left to unpack that themselves. So, obviously, there are some things marketers have to be careful of when they're beginning to approach this. So, choosing partners carefully, data regulation. What's the biggest watch out there that you call out for marketers, Caroline? Can you give a bit of insight into what marketers need to consider in terms of adopting AI in a safe way, in an ethical way, what have you?
Yeah. The first thing, I am a huge fan of the jobs to be done framework. And in that framework, it asks the questions of what's the challenge? What are we trying to fix? Right. We spoke about this a little bit earlier, but in the beginning of AI and folks were so excited about it. Some senior leadership teams literally would say things like, "What are we doing with AI?" And then people would scurry about, right? But the real question is not what do we do with AI, but it's what are the problems that we have as an organization and what makes sense that AI can help us solve? So, what's breaking in marketing right now? Jillian mentioned some really incredible tools around CRM. I'm also a huge fan of first party data for a variety of reasons, just from a product perspective. So think about the pain points as the entry points. AI should solve a real problem. Two, many teams forget that there are enhanced AI features in the products they already have, right? They go directly to how do we buy all of this new stuff for the organization? And I'm not saying you may not want to do that. What I'm saying is first, audit what you have. Audit the new features of those platforms so you can fully utilize the value of them. So if you're using, let's say, an email platform, what are all the new AI features that this email platform has that you weren't even aware of because everybody's moving so fast that you can now lean in on? Um, in terms of the governance, right? There's a few things. You want to ensure that the tools that you're using are obviously following data compliance for whatever market you're in. But then there's also, you want to make sure that the tools you're using, you're asking the right questions about how they're training the models with your data. That's important. So, what I would recommend is even if it's a small organization, appoint a champion to help guide you. It can't be everyone's job. It's just not possible. Someone needs to actually lead and keep the momentum going. So, and then the final piece I would say is everyone is so obsessed with this idea of getting it perfect out of the gate. I talk to so many marketers who are like, well, we don't really know, this and that. We're doing this. I'm like, well, what you're doing sounds pretty great. Build from there. It's not about perfection. It's about what are you doing right now? Who's doing what? What's really helping you? Keep going.
And I'd love to hear what does a successful AI champion inside a marketing organization look like? What are the practices that they have? What are they doing? What would you give advice to the person who feels like they need to be the AI champion in their organization?
Yeah, that's another good question. And a lot of people think it has to be the most technical person on the team. And sometimes it is, for the record, but it doesn't have to be. It has to be someone who's got voracious curiosity because this is a very quickly moving space. If they don't have it, they won't keep up. It is just moving too fast. I also would say it's gotta be someone who has the ability to both listen to the organization, not just deliver communication. A lot of a champion's real job is going to be trying to understand from teams what those real problems are. Maybe it's doing a survey to the entire company populace and asking about where are they spending most of their time? Maybe it's asking questions. But if they can't both listen and communicate back this important information, ideally, you don't want the champion to just have all that information inside and not push it out. That is a definite risk. Think of them as like the hub, but they've got to spoke that out. If they don't spoke it out to everyone or as much as they can, they're not doing the job.
Jillian, in the fourth chapter of the report, we really lay out a roadmap for marketers who are ready to go on this journey. Where should that marketer actually begin? What's that journey look like?
Well, first, without being too literal, marketers can go to page 47 of our report, where we lay out an actual checklist that will help them understand where they are in their journey. But in all seriousness, we've talked about how this needs to be a strategic journey and a structured approach. And so in the report itself, we've outlined 4 steps to adoption. So first, you need to diagnose. So this is really identifying exactly where in marketing you might be underperforming or what really needs support within your marketing value chain. So, really understanding the key pain point, the key problem, right? That's number one. And then, second is that checklist that I talked about. So, this is assessing your readiness. And we have a checklist within the report, and it lets marketers self score themselves across 8 key areas. So, strategy, data, governance, leadership, budget, talent, experimentation, culture. All of those areas are really key pillars that can help a business understand exactly how ready they are to go on a structured AI adoption journey. And so, if you take this kind of quiz of sorts, it'll tell you how aggressive you can be moving forward. So then that leads us to number 3, which is adopt. And that really just means finding that AI champion, finding that internal person that's going to lead your organization on this journey. And then 4 is implement. And that's really piloting. Do have a measurable use case, tie it to clear goals, and see how it could work for you. And then that'll help you truly begin that structured approach and stop you doing ad hoc instances of AI adoption.
So, Jillian, we've done this research, we've benchmarked the state of mid market marketing. If you could give every marketer one behavior change to adopt today, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, one is hard, right? Because there's so many insights we uncovered, but I think something that is really important is I think marketers actually need to stop solely focusing on generating new data. Yes, new opt-ins, new customers, all incredibly important. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be a focus, but it shouldn't be the only focus. I think there's an immediate need to be auditing and cleaning up your existing data set, that first party data that you already have in your systems, because an AI journey is only going to be successful when that data is high quality. That is the raw material that your business needs to deliver things that I talked about earlier: precise segmentation, highly effective personalized campaign, predictive segmentation. All of those advanced uses of email and SMS on your own channels will not work if your data is not clean. The AI is only as good as the data. So that should be really the main behavior change. Focus on cleaning up the data you already have.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute one, and I think all marketing teams kind of know that they have a little spring cleaning to do when it comes to their data. So, definitely one that can unlock a lot of value for them. And then before we wrap up, one final question. Inevitably, since we've uncovered this capability gap in AI, it means that marketers fear they're falling behind, right? If a marketer today that's listening to this feels like they're behind in AI, what is one thing that you would tell them?
We're all behind. Like, literally, full stop. We're all behind. There is nobody if someone tells you that they have completely understood where AI is going and everything that is flying every day, I would call BS, honestly, because all I do for hours every morning is try to understand what are all of the new features and subsets, and there is no catching up. We are all some flavor of behind. It's okay. Stop worrying about it. Take one step. And what I would really recommend people do versus all of this stress, and I've even been looking at surveys about how much stress AI is bringing to marketing teams. Take 15 to 20, a hot 20 it once a day, okay? Everyone can do this. 15 to 20 where you experiment. You don't just read news. I don't even care if it's just using Sora for 20 minutes to make fun videos of Lexi and Jillian. Don't do that. They would hate that. Please don't do that.
Uh,
But you need to get hands-on with the stuff.
So, Caroline just alluded to the fact that we are all behind, and I think that that is incredibly true. But I think something that a mid-market marketer should be thinking about is their enterprise counterparts are behind, right? Like no one is a full expert on this technology. It is still really at the beginning stages. And so that means that you could use your size to your advantage, right? You have your size that can fuel an experimentation mindset, right? And the biggest barrier, I think, is really just not starting. Oh, I'm behind, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But no, you're nimble. You have a small team. You can run quick pilots, and that will help you leapfrog your competition. I would also just say, like, don't worry about being perfect. Start small, measure your wins, and that's what's going to help you build momentum on your over time. That's what's going to help you get that score on our AI readiness checklist even higher. Like, take it 1 month at a time as you're going about this journey.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, Jillian Ryan from Intuit MailChimp and Caroline Gigerich from the IAB, for such an insightful conversation. And thanks to you, dear listener, for tuning into this episode. It's brought to you by Intuit MailChimp. If you'd like a deeper dive into this content, you can download the full report. It's available for free. The Marketing Equalizer, Leveraging AI for Mid-Market Growth. It's on WARC.com and MailChimp.com/resources. And it'll help you benchmark your AI journey and plan your next steps. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to follow us if you don't already. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the WARC Podcast.